I'm Lior Phillips, host of This Must Be the Gig. We're a weekly podcast that documents everything about the world of live music, speaking with choreographers, costume and set designers, the people who run beloved venues and festivals, and, of course, speaking with musicians about that one gig that changed their lives. Get your peek behind the curtain at consequenceofsound.net, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Consequence Podcast Network.
Hey, welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith with an audio interview series presented by WFPK Independent Louisville at WFPK.org, Consequence of Sound, and the Consequence Podcast Network. If you're not already a subscriber of the series, what are you waiting for? We put out interviews every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You're obviously a big music fan. You might as well hit that subscribe button, which you can do at YouTube, at Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts from, including iTunes and Apple Podcasts, where I hope you also give the series a rating and leave a review if you feel so inspired. I'm Kyle Meredith. Today, my guest, Chris Robinson of the Chris Robinson Brotherhood, famously of the Black Crowes, and of course, in the version that he plays those songs in now, As the Crow Flies. We're going to be talking about the new Chris Robinson Brotherhood album called Servants of the Sun. That title means quite a lot with this record. It's the first record they ever made in the summertime, and he tells us all about how that's affected his writing, but also much more than that, how he wanted the record to sound more like their live show. He says the last couple records had songs on it they would never be able to play live, and he didn't want that to be the case this time around. We'll talk about how that's also made it a little bit more psychedelic this time around, brought in those cosmic guitars that they're known for. And we'll also discuss the big news about the band kind of being put on a hiatus towards the end of the year. What is the weight of that word for the Chris Robinson Brotherhood? This comes after one of the band members has left the band, but it also leaves Chris open to do some other things. Possibly a solo album? It sounded pretty likely, Chris tells us. And for fun, we'll turn those clocks back to 1994 and 99 to talk about the Black Crowes records, Amorica and By Your Side. This man's always a lot of fun to talk to. It's Kyle Meredith with Chris Robinson. Well, man, it is so great to hear from you and the band again, the Chris Robinson Brotherhood. Congrats on Servants of the Sun. It's another fantastic record.
Thank you very much.
Let's see here. I read you saying this was the first time you made a record in the summertime, and I didn't know how important that was because a lot of artists talk about how location can affect your writing, but does season have that strong of effect on you as well?
I think so, definitely. I mean, I think everything has an effect. What you're going through, who you're hanging with, what you're eating, you know what I mean? Everything, I think, at a certain point leaks in there, and I had some general notion that I wanted this record. The last few records have pieces on them that are not made to be played live or to put in the live situation, and I think in this case, when I was starting to compose, the tunes, I mean, we had a couple of tunes already, Chauffeur's Daughter and Venus and Chrome. But when I was putting them together, I was like, really started the majority of the writing in the spring. I don't know, and there was definitely something cathartic about renewal, and that could be, you know what I mean? And you're going to be affected by like everything coming to life around you as well.
Is it obvious like that's where we get the title from with the Servants of the Sun?
Yeah, in a sense, we were, at the studio there, and there was, we've only made records there in the winter when it kind of looks like Scotland or something, you expect Heathcliff to be running across the boards. But this time it's like a lot, and it's always beautiful and it's always inspiring, but this time it was alive with, the fauna and the animals and the sky and the ocean, and you know what I mean? So we were all hanging out. My partner Camille and she was doing some collage work or something, and we all live at the studio when we're making those records. And she had some Egyptian like stuff, and I was like, oh, Servants of the Sun, that's us right now, So things happen serendipitously like that. You have to just keep your eyes open to little signs and symbols that fall out of the sky in front of you.
I've heard you say several times that you like to write scenes, and it sort of sounds like what you're talking about now. What are the scenes that we're seeing on this record?
I mean, ideally, like I said, I think there's a lot of I mean, my songs always contain dreams, but, in a personal space, I've been through a lot in the last 2 years. The band's went through a lot. I mean, changes and, people taking time off. I fell in love and went through a nasty divorce to be with my love, all sorts of things that happened to us personally that I think, again, it's, we're lucky to be in the place where I don't make records for anyone else, but for us, I write songs because that's how I feel I relate to my experience and to the collective experience. That's nothing to be too serious. I mean, hopefully that's what the poet does. Sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're melancholy, sometimes they're strange. It could be anything, but I think it's about being available and open to those things and trying to be in the moment. And I think we have the great luxury of doing that, because we didn't really have like a giant, million-selling record to have to do better or, or to keep some antiquated, egocentric money machine going or whatever that you could look at the music business in cynical terms, We really created a place where it's like, we can be as expressive and creative as we want in the kind of way that we want. Thinking, you have a collection of songs. It might be old-fashioned, but yes, let's go into a beautiful studio and see what we can do with them and record and utilize that part of our creative capabilities, not just being on tour, not just doing that kind of presentation,
Well, having two sides of a relationship, in one record, is it interesting to you how those sit side by side when you're talking about, one relationship ending and another one beginning and are all making part of one record? I mean, do you hear the record in that way?
No, not at all. I think the record really has very little to do. I mean, there's some, hopefully, like I said, within the lyrics, there's things people could, feel their way through the images. That's what I want. But I mean, for the most part, it's a lot, there's a lot of loss, but there's also a lot of, like I said before, renewal. Mm-hmm. To me, it's a very up-tempo record, and if anything, like full of love songs. And I know it's a positive record,
Well, going into this and wanting it sounded more like that live shows and songs that you could play. I mean, bands talk about frequently how they want to make an album that sounds like their live show, but I don't know. I guess it's harder than one would expect because few ever really accomplish that. But I feel like you all have.
Yeah. I think it's different, you know what I mean, as well, because our presentation is a little bit different. We make records and write songs, and then by the time we record them, they're one thing, and then by the time that we're playing them on the road, they're like a little bit of another thing. I don't know. That was one of the main factors of if I was going to leave something like the Black Crowes, that I have to be fully immersed in this other thing. A big fully immersed means, okay, if I'm going to, in a sense, sacrifice like this giant rock band on the altar of, what I made of something else that we're looking for, then you have to go whole hog, as they say. You know what I mean? And I think that's a complete deconstruction and a reconstruction of, how I would like this to work. What keeps me interested, the whole process.
It's interesting. I've heard you refer to yourself recently as a gardener and a carpenter, and definitely not a rock star.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was a different, that's when you're doing something, again, like I said, when it's DIY from the ground up, that's more but also, just to have the opportunity to write these songs, to have an audience, still be going into a beautiful recording facility in the year 1819, you know what I mean? Doesn't go unnoticed or, doesn't receive my respect,
Musically, I mean, psychedelia has always been a part of your all sound as much as Roots has, but does this one sort of go further down that psychic cosmic route than I've heard lately?
Maybe. I mean, one of the only other sort of criteria that I laid out for everyone, because I've never told anyone what to play or what really, was the one thing I wanted to do on this album was the last few records have a lot of acoustic instruments and all sorts of instruments and layering and more folk or, roots elements, piano, organ, that we didn't start with. And I kind of, I didn't really see it as getting back to something, but I was like, that's one thing I don't want. I don't want any acoustic guitars. I don't want any piano. I don't want any, Hammond organ. I want to stay more electric. Again, that's probably more where we would be in a live setting.
Right. Chris, the other part of this, however this record finishes, now the word hiatus seems to be tagged onto it. With members leaving, does that diminish how you feel about the record at all? I mean, how things have landed at this point?
No, not at all. I mean, no, not at all. I mean, it's not Pink Floyd in 1972. You know what I mean? It's like things are malleable and liquid. And I mean, at the end of the day, the band is my moniker. So, I mean, I think asking Adam to leave the band doesn't diminish how important it's been over the last solid 7 years of touring and his performance on the record at all. I mean, if anything, I hope he's as proud about his work in the band as that we all are about his work, and vice versa.
How does this affect As the Crow Flies as well? Does it affect it as much as the Brotherhood?
No, I think even less, probably, because that's just like some other thing that exists. You know what I mean?
I know it was almost, it's probably coincidence. I'm going to take an assumption here to say coincidence that Marcus King also canceled his tour, and I know he's in the family, and I'm like, man, that's all happening at once. Yeah.
I have no idea. Why did that happen?
I don't know. He was like shrouded in mystery, and I was like, man, that's a lot right at once from a similar.
I don't know. I haven't spoken to Marcus, and Marcus texted us in Australia to see if we knew where he could, the best tattoo artist it was, but other than that, I haven't talked to Marcus.
Oh, I'm sure we'll figure it. I mean, I hope everything's all right with him personally. I'm a big fan of what he's doing
these
these days
too.
as well.
Now that you told me that, I'm going to have to see what's going on.
So with all this kind of put on ice, does that give you a chance? I mean, is there a solo record on the horizon? I've heard you say that you maybe.
Yeah, definitely. I've definitely have some other songs that have been laying around now since we made this record almost a year ago. Yeah, I mean, we're still, CRB still goes strong, and we have a really, really good European tour until August. And then I have my country band, the Greenleaf Rustlers, here in Marin, that it's been keeping us busy on the side and tends to get busier. So, yeah, you know what I mean? Right now, I just want to, it's the first time I've had a few weeks off. I just want to enjoy my love and my family, and then finish up the CRB year. And then, and so that's really kind of like, it's kind of nice not to look at the calendar and have to be like, oh, I have to be, you know what I mean? It's nice to take a little bit of time away and work on these new songs as well.
Well, I always look forward to all the music you do, and we're always so happy with it. So obviously we're fans around here, and I appreciate what you do with Servants of the Sun. Yeah. Do you got a couple seconds? Can I ask you about two of your older records that are having big birthdays this year?
Wow, cool. I didn't realize my records had birthdays, but sure.
Well, to the Black Crowes record, Amorica is 25 years old. It was released in 94. Jesus
Christ, really? That's amazing.
Yeah, and By Your Side turns 20 years old, released in 99. But I was I went back to and listening to these records and everything, and it was interesting because as I read, both of those records sort of came from abandoned records. Amorica came from, Tall. By Your Side came from Band. I don't know. It's kind of interesting how those two tie together like that. And
yeah, I mean, I think in the history of the Black Crowes, you could see like how we were, or at least I was always pushing the envelope to do something different, and it's a great. I mean, Amorica, I think is a great record, By Your Side, not my favorite record, but it's because of it's the reason, like, wow, we were making all this amazing music, and then there was some music made subsequently between Band and that, and, all of a sudden our contract was at Columbia Records, and they were just a bunch of douchebags over there who, you know what I mean? It shoots, at the end of the 90s, like, they didn't really know what to do, and they just, you know what I mean? So it's funny, like the recordings and music we were making would be real, I don't know, I think they're real different, you know what I mean? We were like, oh, but I think that was probably the Black Crowes' the greatest gift and the greatest curse the whole time, you know what I mean? We weren't really clever enough to do the same thing twice.
That's a great way to word that right there. It's what kept me interested. I didn't know until now, and I know this is common knowledge, but I didn't know that you all tapped Weird Al Yankovic to produce the video for Only a Fool.
Again, at that time, I was a massive drugged out rock star. So some decisions were made without some of my. Not that Weird Al wasn't a swell guy, he truly was. That video is unwatchably bad. But see, that's the things that happen in rock and roll. We had made a video that was one of the best videos that the band ever made for the song By Your Side, which I think is a super strong song. I love that song. And, the bigwigs at the label decided that Only a Fool was the single instead of By Your Side, which was a big mistake. And, but that's how it goes. You don't really get a say when you're playing on house money. You know what I mean?
Does that, when you're choosing songs and As the Crow Flies, does those type of moments in your career cloud the way does that help you choose which songs not to play? Do you stay away from certain songs because of your personal connection?
No, I don't think so. I don't know. Maybe Only a Fool gets to be the redheaded stepchild because of the memories of that. But no, I just think you also, with different groups and different configurations, you play to the strength of the people that you're playing with. And when you have a vast catalog, then you know what I mean. And I think you play to your strength. I mean, at least I think that's what I try to do when I put together different projects and different people to play different, stuff.
Like I said, it works out for me. I mean, going back and listening to these both has been a lot of fun because I don't think I'd listened to them in quite a long time. So anyway, happy birthday to both of them. It turns out they do have birthdays after all. Well, cool, Chris. Thank you so much. Let me travel back in time there. But again, congratulations on the new record with Servants of the Sun. Whatever the next move for you is, I can't wait to hear it, and we'll definitely be here for you.
Oh, I appreciate it, man.
All right. It's always a pleasure talking to you, man. Take care out there.
All right, man. Have a good one.
You too. Take care.
Bye.
And my thanks, as always, to Chris Robinson. The latest Chris Robinson Brotherhood album is called Servants of the Sun. Now, for you big CRB fans, I'm also going to include my previous interview with Chris Robinson. This one comes from 2017, when the band had just released the album Barefoot in the Head. We got to talk about that album's themes, the songs, and plenty more. This is part 2 of Kyle Meredith with Chris Robinson.
Hey, Kyle, it's Chris Robinson.
How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm already excited. Barefoot in the Head. I know it's talked about a little bit about how quick this record came from the last one. You do seem to enjoy the bursts of music. It's not the first time you guys have been doing this. But I'd kind of be curious when songs come this quickly, because I know, especially with your music, a lot of it probably gets road tested before it ever gets to the studio. Did these songs get that chance, or are we looking at more of something like a snapshot of the song's own youth?
I think the previous record, there were 3 songs, two on the Any Way You Love, and one on the EP that we had been playing, and in this case, these were all, I think the sort of the way to make it work is we came out of the last record, and I came home and just kept writing. I was just in a good place, and I think with a lot of the fear and anxiety and stuff in the world about things maybe beyond your control or whatever, maybe I was also digging deep into I felt like I just feel there's a lot of music to make and songs to write, so I just kept continuing through that. But I think the process was different because even though there were a few pieces that by the fall of last year, I started playing a little piece on the bus. But I'm the verse and chorus person, and then we're lucky enough to still go into the studio and make recordings, and as archaic as it is. And it just seems like no matter what, this band, we thrive on the spontaneity. And when a certain group of musicians who can communicate on a certain dynamic, or in a certain dynamic, I should say, you can make something out of nothing. I think it's about being open and aware of when the right thing shows itself, and the other kind of funny thing is we've made a few records now and done a lot of sessions, and this was the second session that we produced ourselves. And we've never had an argument in the studio. There's never been a tense moment. There's just never been any of that. So, the atmosphere when we're ready to work and what's happening should really be open and sincere and trusting, And I think when you lay that kind of fertile territory, that's where your imagination and your form of expression kind of, blossom. A lotus in the night, if you will.
Right. The small bit of irony in what you just said about this band being called the Brotherhood and there being no fighting, and then your previous band and whatever history and lore exists there. And
well, it's funny, but I think you're subject to the kind of trial by fire you're born into, or at least the Black Crowes is what an amazing and unique experience to have, and I'm super proud of the music and the audience that we created. But that is, in a sense, we worked hard and we wanted to manifest success, but it was also something that happened to us in a sense, and the way the music business works and stuff. So, if I'm the kind of person who, given the opportunity to do something else or something different, it's something fulfilling to me on a different level. This is something, or at least my perspective of it, this is something that we've built, you know what I mean? So yeah, it's different. And the motivation's different, the parameters are different.
You're hitting on, I want to go back though, then, talking about that subject matter and why the writing was different and everything and the timing. Obviously you start writing these songs as all the election and all that's happening. And when I talk to a lot of artists, it is really sort of interesting how, because we're all dealing with everything that's going on out there at the same time, and I think we're all going through a similar process too, but we go from this bewilderment to, I hear a lot of people saying, hey, let's fix this, maybe, because some of you are getting hoodwinked. And I read your press release on this, and it's what you're talking about with this music, with the Chris Robinson Brotherhood. You say our music represents an honest way of communicating with people.
Granted, you take the bells and whistles out of a show business presentation. So yeah, I would think that the vibes that we're putting out are different than, not so unique maybe to people in the, it's funny that we're considered in the jam band, but we're just kind of more lyrical and weird to be a jam band. Although, we're like rock and roll, you know what I mean? We still have like a good dose of rock and roll in us that makes it a little different. And then, but we like to have this other side of us that doesn't make us just a rock band. So we fit into this other thing. But I think the presentation should be, again, I learned a lot trying to do Escape from the Black Crowes in the early 2000s with the New Earth Mud. And, just like Steve McQueen in The Great Escape, I was back in the cell bouncing the ball up against the wall, not looking nearly as cool as Steve McQueen. But, the reality is again, getting back to your perspective, was it a success or a failure? And to me, I'm not afraid to take the mistakes and look at them. And when it was time to begin something new, I really learned from the good stuff and the mistakes, So I think that's something that we've instilled in this too. This is a little mom and pop business. We built this thing gig by gig. We're still doing it. You know what I mean? We still are not, we're in no place where everyone is living some life. We're living the life of true troubadours and doing it every night, and living on the bus and playing 5 nights out of the week and doing, averaging 115 shows a year. So, we have to, there has to be something there other than just a paycheck and, a gig. It's just not a gig. It's something else. And I think that's indicative of our scene as well, like the people that are interested in the new people that start to come, they're like, oh, this is a little different, and this is super open and friendly, and, something I want to be a part of. I feel safe,
Now, the stuff you're projecting out there in the lyrics and in the music, because obviously music talks on its own too, I think is important right now. I think, the message you guys are putting out there is important. And, we and I'll hit on the song specifically too, because, the first few singles that's made it out, I really centered it on Behold the Seer.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like the quintessential CRB. There's a lot of stuff going on, and a lot of, hopefully the overall thing isn't too chaotic. If you have a nice rhythmic pulse, someplace that you like to be, everything again, like I was saying, you put things together. That song came together. I had the little opening riff and kind of first little guitar solo and the verse, and then Neil threw in the chorus in like 10 minutes, and then Adam, when we threw that in, we played it around 2 more times, and then we got to where Adam's solo is, and I said, whatever you want to play, just go there and we'll follow you. And he did, and we were like, okay, well, that was that, you know. It really works that way a lot of times with us, that quickly, that, you know, everyone knows where the other person's going when it's at its best, you know.
Yeah. And that line, you know, we ain't got nothing to lose. It's only space and time.
Yeah, you have to hang your hat on something of some, you know, some philosophical idea.
Right. Well, and you know, I'll bring up the album title as well, because everything that you're saying really seems to embody that title, Barefoot. What is it? Barefoot in the Head. You know. Yeah. Barefoot is a state of mind.
You know,
that's a community.
Yeah, and that's the kind of point. I mean, what I like about that is you don't have to have long hair, and you know, you don't have to live in California, or you know, you can. It's a more of a readjusting your perspective. We're still talking about the same thing, and it's about what you know. The whole one of my great inspirations for this whole idea for the band, besides not wanting to be in the music business and dealing with people that don't live like me or think like me or love like me. They're not my tribe, not our tribe, you know. How do we spread the word of our tribe? And again, there's only really one way to the promised land, and that's by getting up and doing it, you know, every day. And, you know, there's a lot of great bands, man. Widespread Panic, I mean, and Fish, you know, they're this giant thing, and people love to go to their parties, you know, they like that group, they like what's going on. So to kind of start something new, you know, like I said, in the craft beer thing here in California, when I saw people waiting in line and they could only buy 2 bottles of Pliny the Elder, this like craft beer out here. Mm-hmm. You can only buy 2 at a time, and it's more expensive than everything else. And people were leaving the place like clicking their heels, like they had this like grand elixir. And that really made sense to me too, though, about in terms of, we don't have to water down anything we're doing. This can stay pure from the source and an authentic thing, as long as we want to keep it that way. Yeah. And as long as you can make the sacrifices that it would take to work hard and put in the work and do the stuff without tremendous financial reward or fame or whatever, right? You have to be, that's where we get back to why you're in this band and why we're doing it, because there has to be some other motivation, you know, and we know what that is. We're all lifelong weirdo musician people obsessed with music, making it, listening, our community, our friends, other musicians. So it's all one big ball of wax.
Yeah. Well, I can say that, you know, I was a fan first because of the songs, but it's for things like that. I mean, music on your own terms for, you know, throughout your career, that's really gave me an honest respect for you and everything you do. And, you know, put it all together, and I look forward to these records when they come out. And as a fan, it's even better when they come this quickly. So thanks for that.
Right on. Yeah, it is funny in a time where everyone's, you know, producer driven, all pop, you know, kind of adolescent driven. Everything's very surface. That, yeah, we're making records like bands did in 1969 and 1970. You know, at least, if not 2 records a year, at least 1 a year, you know.
It's perfect.
But again, we have the beautiful, lucky place to invent our mythology while we're dreaming down the road, you know, like it's pretty unique.
And that is a thing that is severely lost in today's music culture, is the mythology. And that's, you know, the reason we got rock and roll to begin with. You know, a good song and the myth that goes along with it. So thanks for keeping that alive too.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why, you know, that's the seeds of that are still Chuck Berry and Fats Domino and Bo Diddley and Little Richard, you know, and Charlie Rich, Jerry Lee Lewis, you know, all that stuff, you know. So the real rock and roll.
I'll put you in that camp too. It's okay. You don't have to say it. I'll do it for you.
I don't think those guys really would appreciate the tie-dye and like, you know, the THC and all that kind of stuff. But yeah.
All right, Chris, thank you so much for the talk today. I'll relieve you and let you go about life, and I'm looking forward to the release of Barefoot in the Head.
Thanks so much, man. It was great.
All right, man.
Remember, everyone, free the illegal plants.
There you
free
go.
all the illegal plants. And all right.
All right, take care, man.
Thanks a lot, man.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Chris Robinson back in 2017 talking about the CRB record, Barefoot in the Head. And again, the latest Chris Robinson Brotherhood album is called Servants of the Sun. And thanks again to Chris, and thanks to you for checking us out. Again, I hope you do hit the subscribe button. You can subscribe and follow along at Spotify. You can also subscribe at YouTube. Of course, anywhere you get your favorite podcast from, including iTunes and Apple Podcasts, where again, I do hope you give the series a rating and leave a review as well. After that, head to WFPK.org, where I do a show every Monday through Friday. ConsequenceOfSound.net has your music and film news. You can find me at Twitter at Kyle Meredith and Facebook/Kyle Meredith. And that does it for another edition. I'm Kyle Meredith. I'll see you next time.
Consequence Podcast Network.